You're up.
Okay.
We'll go back on the record, and the people prepared to call their next witness.
Your Honor, the people are ready. If it pleases the court, I will call Officer Marcel Bainan to the stand. Marcel.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very good. Please have a seat. State your name and spell it for the record.
Officer Marcel Bainan, M-A-R-C-E-L B-E-H-N-E-N.
All right, Mr. Williams, your witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. Officer, what do you do?
I'm a public safety officer for the city of Kalamazoo.
How long have you been doing that?
8 years.
What do you do in your general course of duties? What's your assignment?
Routine street patrol.
Okay. Were you working in that capacity on February 20th of this year?
I was.
Did you respond to the Sealy Motors area on that date?
I did.
At what point did you respond to Sealy?
Right as the dispatch went out that there was a possible shooting.
Okay. I should ask you, is that in the city and county of Kalamazoo?
It is.
What did you do when you first got there?
Upon my arrival, I observed 2 victims laying on the ground by the Sealy Kia sign, and I was then instructed with another officer to check the buildings to make sure they were secured, the 2 dealerships, as well as check the parking lot for possible additional victims.
Did you find anything?
No, the buildings were secure and there were no more victims.
At some point, did you get in touch with the folks who run the dealership there?
Yeah, I did.
Were you able to learn about a video, surveillance videos that they had?
Yes, I believe it was the IT manager for the Sealy Auto Group. He showed up and we went to his office where they had the surveillance video.
Did you watch the video?
I did.
What'd you see?
I observed the victim's vehicle, the Land Rover, arrive in the parking lot of the Sealy Kia. 2 white males exit the vehicle. They go to look at a blue Ford pickup truck. At some point, another dark-colored Chevy HHR pulls into the parking lot, drives past them, goes out of camera view. A short while later, it comes into camera view again and parks directly in front of the Kia dealership. And then a white male exits the vehicle, walks over to the victims, and eventually stands in front of the Land Rover and appears to shoot them.
Did he then return to the HHR eventually?
He initially went to another vehicle that was offered for sale in the dealership, and then he kind of shuffled, power walked his way back to his vehicle.
What, how would you describe the shooter based on just what you saw in the video?
I would say he's a little shorter, stockier white male. He had grayish-black hair. He was wearing dark clothing. It looked like he was wearing a jacket, and then I could see what appears to be like a yellow T-shirt around his collar line.
Okay. Your Honor, can I approach?
May.
Officer, I'm going to hand you what I've marked as People's Exhibit number 11. You recognize that?
I do.
What is that?
This is a still frame shot from the surveillance video of the Sealy Kia.
And is that an accurate depiction of one of the images you saw in that video?
Yes.
Your Honor, I'd ask to admit People's Exhibit number 11.
People's Exhibit number 11 is admitted.
And what does that depict specifically for the record?
This shows the suspect's Chevy HHR parked in front of the dealership, and I don't know if he's getting in the car or just got out of the car.
So it shows the subject and the vehicle that you observed on the video.
It does.
Let's move ahead a little bit now in the evening. Did you learn at some point in the evening that there had been a suspect detained in the shootings?
I did. I had responded to our detective division to bring them a copy of the surveillance video. At that time, I heard radio traffic that they were behind a possible suspect vehicle. I made my way over there, not any sort of urgency yet. They advised that they had retrieved a firearm from the subject, and believing I could identify the subject from the surveillance video, I responded to the traffic stop.
When you got there, what was the scene of the traffic stop like?
There was the dark-colored black Chevy HHR, matched the vehicle that I saw in the video with the black color, the gray or chrome mirrors, and the chrome grille. The vehicle was facing, I would say, eastbound. Several police cars behind it.
And where was there a suspect on the scene?
Yes, I believe he was in the rear of Sergeant Harrison's police cruiser.
Did you get a look at the suspect, the person that they detained?
I did. I opened the cruiser door and observed the suspect.
How did the person that you saw in the back of Sergeant Harrison's cruiser compare to the person that you saw in the video?
It was pretty much a match. He was wearing dark colored pants. He was wearing a dark colored jacket. I could see the yellow T-shirt that I'd seen in the video. He had the grayish black hair, and he was of a stockier build.
Did you do you see the person that was in the back of Sergeant Harrison's car in the courtroom here today?
Not physically in the courtroom. But
Do you see their image here in the courtroom?
I do.
Where are they and what are they wearing?
He's on the TV screen right here. He's wearing a orange jail jumper.
And did you eventually learn that person's name?
Yes.
Who is that?
Mr. Dalton.
All right, ask the identification to be reflected in
So
the record.
noted.
Did you have any, other than just observing him, did you have any one-on-one contact with Mr. Dalton?
Yes, I eventually took custody of him from Deputy Harrison to transport him to our headquarters for an interview.
You mentioned what he was wearing that was visible to you.
Mm-hmm.
When you took him into custody, did you notice anything else that he was wearing that maybe wasn't immediately visible?
Yes, as I was patting him down to put him in the patrol vehicle, initially I felt what appeared to be a bullet in his front left pocket. Then I also patted him down. I felt clothing of a denser nature in his upper body. I then opened his jacket, lifted up his sweater that he was wearing, and I observed what appeared to be a bulletproof vest.
And you're familiar with bulletproof vests from your
I do wear one
work
every
as a
shift.
police officer?
Yes.
Sorry, you said you wear one every shift. I
Yes.
spoke over you. Okay. What'd you do with the bullet that you found?
I took custody of the bullet, and eventually I turned it over to Lab Tech Nelden in the detective division.
Were you able to tell from examination what kind of bullet it was?
I believe it was a 9mm bullet
And where exactly was that on him?
in his front left pocket.
I have nothing more, Your Honor.
Mr. Solis. See that photograph? So you're identifying this individual as the person that you saw being arrested?
The
Or from
ma-
this photograph?
The male I observed in the video matched the male that was in the backseat of the patrol vehicle.
Is this the best photograph that's on the video?
I would say the video is a much better quality than that still frame photograph.
Okay. So you can see the facial features in the video?
You can see the grayish black hair, but I couldn't make out facial hair. But I could tell it was a white male.
Okay. So you're identifying him from the video that you can't make out the facial features?
I'm saying the video has a better quality than that still frame photo, but
So are you identifying him from the video?
his physical build and the clothing.
Okay. But not his facial features?
I can't see his exact face.
Okay. So when you identify him, you're simply saying that this individual that's at the Sealy's is dressed similarly, shaped similarly as the person that was being stopped?
I would say it appeared to be the same individual.
Okay. Based on his clothing, height, and all that, not on his facial features?
Well, I can't tell eye color,
Okay.
stuff like that, or his exact facial hair, but
In fact, you can't tell much of his face other than perhaps facial hair. Is that right?
his hair color, the shape of his face.
Mr. Williams?
Nothing additional.
May this witness be excused.
No objection.
No objection. Thank you.
Your Honor, our next witness is Detective Lieutenant Jeff Crump.
Those are both been admitted already.
You solemnly swear or affirm testimony you're about to give to be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Please have a seat, state your name and spell it for the record.
Jeff Crump, C-R-U-M-P.
Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Your Honor. Your Honor, before I begin, I mentioned at the very start of our testimony, much earlier this morning, that we had a stipulation to Jeff Crump's qualifications as an expert in the field of firearms identification. So if the court could qualify him, I would appreciate it.
Okay, yeah, that's not, that was stipulated too, and was admitted as such.
What do you do, sir?
I'm a firearms examiner for the Michigan State Police.
How long have you been doing that?
18 years.
What kind of special training do you have?
I have a master's degree from Michigan State University. That's in criminal justice with an emphasis in forensic science. The training program for a firearms examiner is much like an apprenticeship. It's a 2-year training program where you work directly underneath an experienced examiner within that 2 years. It's a lot of hands-on casework type training. At the end of the 2 years, you're given competency tests. If you pass those, then you're allowed to work on your own independently. However, anytime we make any kind of identification, it's always seconded by another examiner.
Are you familiar with the case of the People versus Jason Dalton?
Yes,
Did you work on that case?
I did.
You worked in a couple different capacities, actually, correct?
Yes.
What'd you do?
The first part of what I did was respond to the crime scene at the Cracker Barrel restaurant. And then the following day, I processed the vehicles that were involved at the Cracker Barrel restaurant. And then additionally, I examined all the firearms-related evidence back at the lab after it was all recovered.
Did you take any evidence into your possession at the Cracker Barrel?
I did not personally, no.
You did other duties in processing this?
I mainly was photographing and taking notes at the Cracker Barrel.
So you're aware that there were shell casings found, you just didn't personally handle them?
Correct.
How about, what vehicles did you process?
Do you want specifically or just in general?
We'll start generally and then work it.
Okay. One was a like a reddish color Chevy Cruze, and the other one was, I think, like a gold color, Olds Silhouette, I believe.
And let me ask you about the Chevy Cruze specifically. Did you find any shell casings in that vehicle?
The following day when we processed that vehicle, yes, we did find some fired cartridge cases in there.
Did you take those into evidence also?
I did.
I want to talk about your role for which you've been qualified as an expert in your firearms identification. Did you prepare a report in this matter?
I did.
We've been working with it informally. I think the judge might have it now. I believe it's People's Exhibit 12, Your Honor. Do you have that for a moment? You just show it to Mr. Crump long enough to identify. Is that a copy of your report?
Yes, one of them, record number 5, yes.
Is that something you keep in the regular course of your business?
Yes, it is.
Your Honor, I'd ask to have that formally admitted now.
Any objection or what here? No objection. People's Exhibit number 12 is admitted.
Tell me just generally about your process for identifying a shell casing.
Well, for a shell casing, we're going to look for what we call individual characteristics, and those are characteristics that are left on the fired cartridge case when it's in the firearm. So when it's fired in the firearm and you have a lot of internal pressures going on because of the gases burning, and which creates pressure to cycle the firearm, and it creates pressure to push the bullet out the barrel. All those internal pressures expand the fired cartridge case within the chamber, and any imperfections that are on the surface, inside surface of the firearm, then are getting transferred over to the surface of the fired cartridge case. And we look for individual characteristics that make it unique to that individual firearm to allow us to say, yes, it was fired in that firearm.
Were you given a Glock 9mm to evaluate in this case?
I was. That was one of them that I examined, yes.
Your Honor, can I approach the witness?
You may.
Sir, I'm to hand you what we have already admitted as People's Exhibit number 8. Does that look like the Glock that you handled in this matter?
Well, very well could be. I can't see the serial number on this in the picture, but it's a 9mm. It's a Glock model 19, if I'm reading it right.
Well, let's get more specific. You did do some testing on a Glock, correct?
I did.
And where is that found in your report?
Let me see if I can find it.
Page 6, I believe, if that helps.
Yeah, page 6 of my report, item number 43A. 9mm Luger caliber Glock, model 19, serial number Sam Nora Zebra 001.
How did you go about trying to determine? I got a little bit ahead of myself there. Did you also get shell casings turned into you to evaluate as a part of this case?
Yeah, numerous shell casings. Yes, I did. Fired cartridge cases.
So let's start speaking about the Glock. How did you go about trying to determine whether any of the shell casings that you received were fired by the Glock that was also submitted?
Well, the way we do a comparison is obviously we have to get fired cartridge cases from the firearms themselves. So we call those test shots. So I will examine the firearm. When I'm finished examining it, I'll take it into the shoot room and I'll test fire it. I then use those test shots as comparisons to the evidence. So what I'm able to do is using my comparison microscope, which has 2 stages to it, I can put a test shot on one side and I can put a piece of evidence on the other side. When I look through the viewfinder, I see both samples at the same time, and when you magnify those samples, then you can see all those different individual characteristics that are on the surface of the test and the evidence.
Were you able to determine that any of the casings submitted to you were fired by that particular Glock 9mm?
Yes, I was.
Which ones did you determine were found? And as you know, the court has a copy of your report, so you can identify it using the report for ease of everyone's understanding.
So on page 7 of my report are part of my results. So items 15 through 15I and items 48A through 48E were identified as having been fired from that Glock firearm.
Do you know where those were collected from?
15 through 15I, based on the labels on the containers that were submitted to me, those were submitted by the Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department, and I believe all of those were collected at the High Meadows, if I'm saying that right, apartment complex.
Okay. And how about the others? If you don't know, that's fine.
48A through 48E, again, based on the containers and the labeling of those containers, again, submitted by Kalamazoo County Sheriff's Department. And those were, I believe, collected from a Chevy Equinox.
Your Honor, do you have exhibit number 10 at the bench there?
I do.
Can you just pass that over to you? Again, sir, I'm going to ask you to take a look at what we previously admitted as People's Exhibit number 10. Is that or is that similar to the Walther firearm that was submitted to you for testing?
It is a Walther firearm. Again, I can't see the serial number, which is usually what I use to identify a firearm, but it appears to be the same.
Okay. And is the Walther reflected in your report also?
It is.
Where would we find that?
Page 3 of my report, container 18, item number 17, 9mm Luger caliber Walther, model P99, with the serial number of 016443.
And again, based on the information, if you know, do you know where that was taken from?
If I recall, that was recovered from the suspect.
And I take it you went through the same process you did with the Glock in trying to determine if any of the casings came from this firearm?
Correct. Basically, take test shots using that firearm, use my test shots, put those on the comparison microscope along with the unidentified fired cartridge cases, and again see if we have matching individual characteristics.
Were you able to link any of the cartridges that were submitted to you, casing, excuse me, with the Walther?
I was.
And again, is that in the, again, back to page 7 of your report?
It is.
And which items were those?
The first paragraph of my results. So the following items were identified as having been fired from the Walther firearm, and those are items 1 through 12.
Do you know where those came from?
Those came from the parking lot of the Cracker Barrel. Items V1 through V5, and those I recovered from the Chevy Cruze.
And so those were something you actually, in your role processing the vehicle, you actually recovered those yourself?
Yes.
Okay. And those you did also find that those matched the Walther?
Yes.
Sorry, I interrupted you, please.
That's fine. And then items 21 through 26, 28, 30, 31, and 33 through 39.
Those casings all matched the Walther?
Yes.
And do you know where those were taken from?
Again, from indications of the labeling on the packaging, those were recovered by Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety, and I believe from an address on Stadium Drive.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Mr. Solis.
No questions, sir.
Mr. Ruski.
I have no objection.
Mr. Solis.
Your Honor, People's Exhibit 11 is given back to me, so I'll return that. The other exhibits to the court.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Paul.
Your Honor, the people would call Paul Gagnon.
Raise your right hand, please. Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Very good. Please have a name. Have a seat. State your name and spell it for the record.
Paul, last name Gagnon, Gonyeu.
Mr. Getty.
Mr. Gagnon, how are you employed?
Michigan State Police Technical Services Unit,
What rank do you hold?
Detective Sergeant,
How long have you been with the Michigan State Police?
almost 19 years.
How long have you been a detective sergeant?
Little over a year now.
What do you do with the technical service unit?
We provide a variety of different services to state, county, and local law enforcement investigators as they handle criminal investigations.
What kind of services?
Anything from covert audio, video, cell record analysis, device placement, cell phone extractions, to name a few.
Let's talk about cell phones. What kind of things can you do with cell phones in the technical services unit?
I can extract data from them, analyze that data, in addition develop and obtain service provider records and further analyze those records for communications or data contained within them that may be relevant to a given investigation.
And did you participate in an investigation of a cell phone that was part of the February 20, 2016 shooting incident here in Kalamazoo?
Yes, sir.
When did you when did you receive the phone? What did you do?
I believe it was the early morning hours of February 21st, 2016 at the Kalamazoo Department of Public Safety. There was a post-incident briefing there with the investigators, and that's when I was brought up to speed as far as the investigation and the findings thus far, and provided a phone for Jason Dalton.
Who provided you the phone?
I believe it was Detective Sergeant Brian DeWeiss.
The phone itself, what kind of phone was it?
Apple iPhone S, 5S.
What did you do to examine the phone?
After obtaining a search warrant for the extraction of the contents, I then used specialized software, which I've been trained to operate, to extract the contents of that device in an effort to locate communications or data that may be relevant to the incidents that were being investigated.
As part of obtaining information from the phone itself, does the phone contain information that could be used to identify whose phone it was?
Yes, most phones do.
What kind of information was there in this phone?
A lot of user activity, pictures, videos, large number of those which would support or indicate who a device user or owner may be. Also email addresses that are associated, identifiers on the phone itself, unique identifiers on the SIM card itself that correlate back to the service provider in this case, which is AT&T, who also provides additional information as far as who the device owner is.
In this phone that you examined that we're talking about, were you able to identify whose phone it was?
Yes, sir.
Whose phone was it?
Jason Dalton.
In addition to being able to identify whose phone it was, were you able to extract information that would help us identify where that phone was at a particular point in time?
From the phone extraction itself, no. Location data was obtained through different sets of service provider records from AT&T and Uber.
And so with the assistance of other agencies, including AT&T and Uber and yourself, through the Michigan State Police Technical Services Unit, what type of information was able to be found with regard to the location, physical location of that phone at any particular point in time?
For the first shooting location over at Meadow Townhomes, I believe, AT&T records reflect communications relevant to that time period that put that device in that same general geographic area, utilizing a tower that, from memory, I believe was about...
I'm going to Judge, I guess at this point, it's hearsay.
It's not hearsay, Your Honor. He's participating in the investigation and is being provided information from multiple resources, but it's his investigation that's leading us to these particular points.
He's getting information off the document that he's testifying to. It's hearsay. He's getting the information off the document, and if he's using it for the truth of the matter, so it's hearsay.
You know, yeah, the document here isn't an issue. You're pulling that information. So I'll grant or sustain the motion at this time. If you've got some other way of establishing, bringing that evidence in, we'll hear it. At this point, he's not able to testify about a report that he received from AT&T for the truth of what's being asserted, the location of the phone. I think that's the gist of your objection.
Yes, it is, Judge.
Is that how you're able to locate the phone, is based off the information from AT&T?
Yes, sir.
All right. You indicated that there were, well, we have two other scenes at approximately 10:08, 10:10 p.m. At the Sealy Automotive Group, a 911 call was received. Based upon your investigation and information obtained from this phone in cooperation with, I don't know, with others perhaps, were you able to locate where this phone was at that time?
Same objection, Judge.
I'm not asking him where the phone was.
He hasn't testified how he. Yeah, I guess we have to wait and see what his answer is, and then you maybe objection.
Location data for that location and that time period was obtained from Uber records.
And so from Uber records, I'm not asking you where, but based upon information that was provided to you from Uber records, you know where the phone was.
Same objection, Judge.
Well, he's not asking. He's not asking him what the data is. He's just asking him. I don't know if it's going to be all that relevant, but it's not hearsay until he's saying what that evidence is from some third-party source. So he's just asking how he collects his evidence, is what I'm hearing at this point.
Well, if his answer is, it was at this location, that's based on the records that he received.
I don't know if that was his question. Or rephrase your question, or restate your question. Or repeat your question.
Without telling me where the phone was, can you, from your independent investigation into this phone, tell me where that phone was at 10:10 p.m.?
Yes.
How?
Utilizing records that were provided by Uber.
All right. But without utilizing the records that were provided by Uber, you're not able to do that?
There's no additional information that would indicate location data at that time.
And is that the same for the Cracker Barrel scene?
Yes, sir.
All right. So in order, just so we're clear, in order to talk about the location of the phone at 5:30 p.m., we need to have a representative from AT&T to tell us what they told you. With regard to the phone at the later locations, we need Uber's assistance because you can't do it based on your investigation into the phone. Is that right?
Generally with record certifications, those are things I will testify to.
I don't have any other questions at this time, Your Honor.
Mr. Solis, any questions?
No.
Mr. Oglesby?
No objection to any.
Any objection?
I have none, Your Honor. We have no further witnesses to call for purposes of preliminary examination at this time.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Solis, any witnesses that the defense?
Not for purposes of exam.
Okay. Mr. Dick?
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, Tiana Carruthers identified the defendant as the person who shot her. Marcel Banya identified the defendant as the person in the video from the Sealy shootings. Mr. Solomon identified the defendant as the person fleeing the scene at the Cracker Barrel. All three of these witnesses' testimony established that it was in fact Jason Brian Dalton and not some other person. The shell casings from the scene at the Meadows apartment have been testified to by Specialist Crump as having been fired from the Glock semi-automatic handgun that was found in the defendant's home at the time of the search warrant. Specialist Crump has further testified that the shell casings from the Sealy crime scene were all fired by the Walter 9mm semi-automatic pistol found on the defendant at the time he was stopped. Specialist Crump has further testified that all of the shell casings found at the scene at the Cracker Barrel were fired by the 9mm Walter semi-automatic handgun that was found on the defendant at the time of the stop. Both the Sealy photographs as well as the Cracker Barrel photographs established that the person was driving a Chevrolet HHR, the same vehicle that was being driven by the defendant at the time of the stop. This evidence establishes clearly beyond that necessary for purposes of the preliminary examination probable cause to believe that it was the defendant that in fact shot Tiana Carruthers, Abigail Croft, Tyler Smith, Richard Smith, Dorothy Judy Brown, Barbara Hawthorne, Mary Jo Nye, and Mary Lou Nye. The stipulated two autopsy reports established that these were homicides. As to Mary Lou Nye, Mary Jo Nye, Barbara Hawthorne, and Dorothy Judy Brown, Richard Smith, and Tyler Smith. Abigail Koff, the testimony is established, was shot through the head. She was bleeding and there was other fluids leaking from her head. Tiana Carruthers was shot multiple times, both femurs, broken fragments in her liver, as well as a shoulder that need to be reconstructed. In addition to having been shot 4 times, multiple other shots were fired at Tiana Carruthers as established by the number of shell casings found at the scene. There is certainly probable cause here to believe that the defendant is guilty of the charges as listed in the complaint, and we would ask that he be bound over for trial in circuit court. Thank you.
Mr. Solis?
We'll leave it to the court's discretion based on the evidence that's presented.
Very good. The purpose of a preliminary examination is to determine whether there's probable cause to believe that a crime was committed and whether there's probable cause to believe that the defendant committed it. Prosecution need not establish guilt beyond a reasonable doubt today, that's for a later date, but must present evidence sufficient to make a person of ordinary caution and prudence conscientiously entertain a reasonable belief of the defendant's guilt. I didn't count up how many witnesses that we heard today, but quite a few, and total of 11 exhibits And we've got 16 counts that the defendant is charged with. And the court does find that as to count 1, which is open murder, based on the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, and reviewing exhibits, admitted exhibits 1, 9, and 10, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, that Mary Lou Nye was murdered with a handgun. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. As to count 2, felony firearm, based upon the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, and exhibits 9 and 10. And I'll say that I tried to keep track of, as I listened intently to each witness, which of the specific 16 counts were testimony related to. Some of them related to all of them, for instance, but so I may be excluding some of the witnesses, not intentionally, but these were the main ones that I focused on. The court finds as to count 2. The court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, that the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Mary Lou Nye. At the time, the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 3, open murder, based on the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, in exhibits 2, 9, and 10, the court finds probable cause that on the evening of February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, Mary Jo Nye was murdered with a handgun. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. As to count 4, felony firearm, based upon the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, exhibits 9 and 10, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Mary Jo Nye. At the time, the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 5, open murder, based on the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, in exhibits 3, 9, and 10, the court finds probable cause that on the evening of February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, Barbara Hawthorne was murdered with a handgun. Further, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. Count 6, felony firearm, based on the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Cody Dene, Scott Brooks, Paul Planger, and Jeff Crump, in exhibits 9 and 10, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Barbara Hawthorne, and that at the time, the defendant knowingly or possessed a firearm. As to count 7, open murder, based upon the testimony of witnesses Solomon, Dene, Brooks, Planger, and Crump, in exhibits 4, 9, and 10, the court finds probable cause that on the evening of February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, Dorothy Brown was murdered with a handgun. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. As to count 8, felony firearm, based on the testimony of witnesses Solomon, Dene, Brooks, Planger, and Crump, in exhibits 9 and 10, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Dorothy Brown, and that at the time the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 9, open murder, based upon the testimony of Alexis Cornish, Todd Neldon, Scott Brooks, Marcel Bainan, and Jeff Crump, in exhibits 5, 10, 11, and 12. And I should mention exhibit 12 is evidence of all of these, all counts. The court finds probable cause that on the evening of February 20, 2016, in the city of Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo County, State of Michigan, Richard Smith was murdered with a handgun. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. As to count 10, felony firearm. Make sure. Lose track. The court, based on the testimony of the witnesses, Alexis Cornish, Todd Neldon, Scott Brooks, Marcel Bainan, and Jeff Crump, and exhibits 10 and 12, the court finds probable cause that on the February 20, 2016, in the city of Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Richard Smith, and at the time, the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 11, open murder, based on the testimony of the witnesses Alexis Cornish, Neldon, Brooks, Bainan, and Crump, exhibits 6, 10, and 12, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in the city of Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, Tyler Smith was murdered with a handgun. Furthermore, the court finds probable cause that the defendant committed the murder. Count 12, felony firearm, based on the testimony of witnesses Cornish, Neldon, Brooks, Bainan, and Crump, in exhibits 10 and 12, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in the city of Kalamazoo, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of murder, the victim being Tyler Smith. That at the time, the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 13, assault with intent to murder, based on the testimony of witnesses Richard Solomon, Danae, Brooks, Flanger, and Crump, in exhibits 10 and 12. The court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant tried to physically injure another person, that being A.K., a minor child. Second, that when the defendant committed the assault, he had the ability to cause an injury, or at least believed that he had the ability. And third, that the defendant intended to kill the person he assaulted. As to count 14, felony firearm, based on the testimony of witnesses Solomon, Danae, Brooks, Flanger, and Crump, in exhibits 10 and 12, the court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Texas Township, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of assault with intent to murder, and at the time, the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. As to count 15, assault with intent to murder, based on the testimony of witness Tiana Crothers, James Dunlop, Jeff Crump, in exhibits 10 and 12. The court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Richland Township, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant tried to physically injure another person, that being Tiana Crothers. Second, that when the defendant committed the assault, he had the ability to cause an injury, or at least believed that he had the ability. And third, that the defendant intended to kill the person he assaulted. The 16th and final count, felony firearm, based upon the testimony of witnesses Carruthers, Dunlop, and Crump, in exhibits 10 and 12. The court finds probable cause that on February 20, 2016, in Richland Township, Kalamazoo County, state of Michigan, the defendant committed the crime of assault with intent to murder, and that at the time the defendant committed, or the time the defendant knowingly carried or possessed a firearm. The court, having found that each of the 16 charges were committed, probable cause that the defendant committed the offenses, and that venue is proper in Kalamazoo County, the court hereby binds the defendant over to circuit court in this matter. May retrieve your witnesses. Anything else to come before the court at this time?
No, Your Honor, thank you.
Thank you, Judge.
I'll retake the exhibits for that, Your Honor.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Anybody who wants to, if you go up to the fourth floor, we'll give you a couple of minutes to talk to you. Answer any questions you might have. Okay? All right, I'll meet you there in 5.